Chapter 1. Poor knowledge of sexuality is responsible for the collapse of many marriages. Science tells us that Homo sapiens is one of the 5 surviving species of great apes. The others are chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and orangutans. We humans have a common ancestor with bonobos and chimps. Like them, we are horny descendants of hypersexual forefathers and foremothers. Why do we so fervently believe, then, that our sexual life is the matter of till death do us part? Sex at Dawn will reveal this mystery of a gigantic cultural shift that took place about 10,000 years ago. The real story of human sexuality has been kept a secret for so long because the truth is always dangerous and subversive. Sexuality is a powerful resource that has the potential to make us more confident and capable of working miracles. However, liberated human beings are hard to control, especially in repressive societies. For that reason, all the topics circulating the idea of sex were pathologized by physicians, silenced by religious authorities, studiously ignored by scientists, and covered up by didactic therapists. In Spanish, the word esposas means both wives and handcuffs. An unhappy marriage often serves as a frame for novels about the sexual life of man and woman. It is to be pitied and mourned. The man typically loses his freedom, whereas the woman is repressed in different aspects. Nowadays, something about the concept of marriage and human relationships is very wrong. According to the American Medical Association, 42% of American women suffer from sexual dysfunction. Moreover, Viagra breaks sales records year after year. Finally, pornography seems to absorb the money of the willing devotees. According to different estimates, pornography makes from $57 billion to $100 billion annually. In the United States, porn generates more revenue than ABC, CBS, and NBC combined. There's no denying that we're a species with a sweet tooth for sex. Christopher Ryan and Cacilda Jetha. Since our childhood, we have been taught to fight our eroticism and deny our desires. Our fantasies evolve, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Instead of battling our hunger, we need to embrace it as a way to understand more about our nature. In this summary, you will see how human beings evolved in intimate groups where people shared almost everything: food, shelter, protection, childcare, and even sexual pleasure. The authors don't mean to recreate the image of a Marxist hippie. Instead, they aim at showing how contemporary culture misrepresents the connection between love and sex. Spoiler, there is sex without love, and it is not a subject of blame. Did you know? According to a U.S. News and World Report, Americans spend more money at strip clubs than at Broadway, off-Broadway, regional and non-profit theaters, the opera, the ballet and jazz, and classical music performances combined. Chapter 2. Despite his genius, Darwin didn't know much about sex. We may start reevaluating our complicated relationship with sexuality with Charles Darwin. His book, On the Origin of Species, was a breakthrough work that laid the foundation for evolutionary biology. Nevertheless, it was quite biased regarding sex and eroticism. The scholars seemed to underestimate their importance, to put it mildly. Darwin willingly accepted Thomas Hobbes' still famous characterization of prehistoric human life as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Remarkably, these false assumptions are still pervasive in present-day theories of human sexuality. When we are asked to imagine prehistoric sexual encounters, we get the image of a caveman dragging a bewildered woman with one hand by her hair while holding a club in the other. In his book, Darwin wrote that a woman was passive and reserved compared to a man. The man had to court her, and she was to escape his endeavors. He made it look like this female reticence was a defining factor for successful mating. Even though that might be entirely accurate for many mammals, it isn't particularly applicable to human beings, or for that matter, the primates most closely related to us. Observing his male contemporaries, who were after several women at a time, Charles Darwin assumed that early humans might have been polygamous. To his mind, it was one male mating with several females. He wrote that Aboriginal people lived in small communities where the stronger men had as many wives as they could obtain and support. Charles Darwin based most of his assumptions about women on the insufficient experience he had with them. Needless to say, how brilliant a scientist Charles Darwin was. However, he had little empirical data regarding his own sexual experience. It was limited to his vehemently proper wife, Emma Wedgwood, who was also his first cousin. The man himself was too buttoned up even to admit the presence of lust. That reflected in his very theoretical approach to sexual issues. For example, his notes on the benefits of marriage read that a man might get children who would be faithful companions in old age and an object of love. A child was better than a dog in terms of companionship anyway. However, chattering with women, which seemed a painful yet inseparable part of the marital life, was a mere waste of time. Did you know? The book On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin was published in 1859. Chapter 3. Sexual exclusivity is crucial to paternity. What does a male suitor get for his preening and showing off? Sex, and exclusive access to a particular woman. According to evolutionary psychology, in prehistoric times, men offer goods and services in exchange for consistent sexual access, called the sex contract by biological anthropologist Helen Fisher, Ph.D. Many believe that nature intends for a male suitor to become the most attractive for the female he wants to get. For that purpose, he preens and shows off for her, and as a reward, he gets sex and exclusive access to her. According to evolutionary psychology, men put forward their services, goods, and possessions in prehistoric times to secure consistent sexual access. The sex contract is often compared to game theory. People who produce the most offspring, who then reproduce further, win because their return on investment is the highest. According to this contract, a woman should choose a man who will help her during pregnancy and sustain her and the baby after the birth. Otherwise, she is just wasting her time, energy, and risks of pregnancy. Furthermore, without a supportive father, the child has much lower chances of making it past sexual maturity. In turn, a man determines to invest his time, resources, and energy in a woman who is not promiscuous. Otherwise, he risks raising another man's child. That might sound like a humane thing to do, but men want exclusivity when it comes down to their relationship with a woman. Moreover, they want their genes to advance into the future. In keeping with the evolutionary theory's logic, leaving a genetic legacy is our primary purpose in life. Men lay claim to particular women as songbirds lay claim to territories, as lions lay claim to a kill, or as people of both sexes lay claim to valuables. Margot Wilson and Martin Daly. A book on evolutionary psychology, The Adapted Mind, edited by John Tooby, Leda Cosmides, and Jerome H. Barkow, clarifies the sex contract as such. In nature, women see men as sexually attractive if they have high mate value. This high mate value results from the ability and willingness of a man to provide for a woman and her offspring, protect a woman and her children, engage in direct parenting activities. Did you know? A pretty woman theory claims that women have evolved to subconsciously exchange erotic pleasure for a man's wealth, protection, status, and other perks. Chapter 4. Heartable paternity was known to our ancestors. Anthropologists Paul Valentine and Stephen Beckerman explain the concept of heartable paternity as a phenomenon in which a child can have more than one father. All sexually active women bear traces of all the lovers she has ever had. The semen of each new sexual partner accumulates in the womb, contributing to the fetus's formation. However, many reputable sources state that this is not a scientifically verifiable fact. Instead, it is a cultural conceptualization. The advocates of partible paternity believe that if a woman stops having sex, her fetus ceases to develop. This theory's implications go as far as to state that a woman is eager to give her child every possible advantage in life. Therefore, she will try to have sex with as many men as possible. Symbolically or intentionally, this woman will require all kinds of contributions from the best hunters, the funniest storytellers, the kindest, strongest, best-looking, etc., so that her child gets a little of the best from each man. Anthropologists have discovered this method of conception and fetal development in many South American societies. Valentine and Beckerman explain that partible paternity is an ancient folk belief capable of supporting effective families that provide satisfactory paternal care of children and manage the successful rearing of children to adulthood. In view of the frequent occurrence of modern domestic groups that do not consist of or contain an exclusive pair-bonded father and mother, I cannot see why anyone should insist that our ancestors were reared in monogamous nuclear families and that pair bonding is more natural than other arrangements. Marvin Harris. In Paraguay, an anthropologist asked Ache people to identify their fathers. It turns out the Ache has 4 different kinds of fathers. They are Miare, the father who put it in; Peroare, the father who mixed it; Momboare, those who spilled it out; Biciare, the fathers who provided the child's essence. At this angle, a child enjoys having multiple fathers, all of whom care about them. Such children have higher chances of surviving childhood than the ones with just one father. Moreover, no one calls such children bastards or sons of bitches. Different fathers of one child don't treat each other as rivals. Instead, they see each other as partners who contributed as much as possible to the child's best benefit. Shared paternity is their special bond, which is a different kind of human relationship. Chapter 5. Extramarital sex was common in prehistoric time. While male hypersexuality could be a thing even for Charles Darwin, women are usually expected to suffice with belonging to just one partner. This narrative needs to be debunked. Understanding is a lot like sex. It's got a practical purpose, but that's not why people do it normally. Frank Oppenheimer. Every monogamous society has documented numerous cases of adultery, with extramarital sex as a leading cause of divorce in the world. Zoologist and surrealist painter Desmond Morris's book, The Naked Ape, became a classic. In this book, Morris explains that sexual behavior pertains only to a pair-bonded state, whereas adultery is the imperfection that ruins that state. According to CNN, 6 adulterers are being stoned to death in Iran every other minute. Before the hypocritical others decided to cast the first stones, they buried male adulterers to their waists and women to their necks, so they would die faster for erroneously believing that their bodies belonged to themselves. All major religions imply that women have no control over their bodies, let alone their sexuality. A passage from the Bible reads, "Whereas any man that committeth adultery with another man's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall be put to death." Leviticus chapter 20, verse 10. This judgment seems fair, at least because it regards both as sinners. To compare, a quote from the Torah says that any unmarried woman who has sexual relations with an unmarried man shall be brought to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her with stones that she die. Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 21. Despite these horrendous punishments, adultery persists everywhere, without exception, but not everyone is punished with equal severity for indulging in it. Non-human primates are never monogamous. Of course, as humans, we have evolved culturally, but our unconscious sexual drives remain beastly for the most part. Even when we repress them, they find their way out. As anthropological findings suggest, extramarital sexual affairs were recorded in every human culture ever studied. Moreover, the most passionate anti-adultery campaigners are usually the ones committing the most hardcore acts of adultery. Considering all this, we can see that monogamy does not come naturally to our species. Why would anyone want to risk reputations, careers, families, even presidential legacies for something against human nature? If monogamy is an ancient, evolved trait of our species, adulterous transgressions would be infrequent and such horrible punishment unnecessary. No one should be threatened with death to act following its nature. Did you know? The total number of monogamous primate species that live in large social groups is 0. Chapter 6. Our prehistoric ancestors had no other choice but to share resources. Now that we have regarded a different view of prehistoric human sexuality, we can draw two interconnected assumptions. A prehistoric woman and her child need food and protection, and a willing man can provide that. This woman offers him her beauty and sexual autonomy in exchange. This way, the man knows that he is supporting his own offspring. This pragmatic narrative elicits how protein and protection are equal to the guarantee of assured paternity. Moreover, the result of this exchange is the increased life expectancy of the child. Evolution theorists believe that the survival of offspring is the cornerstone of natural selection. Although this monogamous model ensures exclusivity and ownership, wouldn't it be better for a child to have several men taking care of their future? Logically, generalized sharing means more protection, meat, and status. Moreover, all the risks are mitigated faster and more efficiently. We can define the relationships between our prehistoric foragers as egalitarian. It means that everyone had equal rights and was treated equally by others. After all, our ancestors did everything to survive. They had no other choice but to team up and pull their efforts together. Darwinian terms make perfect sense to suppose that prehistoric humans followed the path offering the best chance of survival. They chose to share over preserving their egos. When we decide to share and assume mutual responsibility, we don't feel the necessity to steal others' resources. For Ice Age mobile hunting societies, the band model of social organization, with its obligatory sharing of resources, was really the only way to live. Peter Bogucki. Under these prehistoric conditions, egalitarianism is the only way to live, as Bogucki concluded. Institutionalized sharing of resources and sexuality spreads and minimizes risk, assures food won't be wasted in a world without refrigeration, eliminates the effects of male infertility, promotes the genetic health of individuals, and assures a more secure social environment for children and adults alike. Far from utopian romanticism, foragers insist on egalitarianism because it works on the most practical levels. Did you know? Female bonobos share many unique traits with humans and none with other species. Conclusion. Humanity still faces many unanswered questions, and some of them are rhetorical. However, there are things that we can't know for now and things we don't want to know. With the latter, it is often a matter of ignorance or fear. Sexuality is one of such things that many of us try to repress. Why do we find it easier to run away from something that we could embrace instead? The answers might differ, but the main reason usually is the irrational and inexplicable nature of the drive we feel. Thinking about our sexuality, we tend to find scary things we can't control right away rather than embrace their uniqueness. What many fail to see at this conjunction is that sexuality is not to be controlled. We should make use of it. Our prehistoric ancestors were not nearly as eloquent as we are today, yet they found it easier to come to terms with their sexual behavior. They understood that to survive, they needed to put their sexuality to work. Unlike the monogamous humans of today, our foragers believed in sharing resources, including sexual ones. This philosophy helped them to get by and evolve. Why don't we take their endeavors seriously? Even if we put sexuality aside for a second, there is still another great practice our predecessors had. In times of increased danger, they chose to parent a child as a team. One baby enjoyed the attention and protection of several loving fathers. Today, at a time when so many fathers leave their families, paternal team parenting sounds unbelievable, right? Try this. As children, many of us learn to feel ashamed about our erotic curiosity. An average child shows interest in sex as early as 7 years. These 5 criteria will help you figure out whether you are tainted by sexual shame. 1. You are insecure about yourself, the way you look, and how others see you. 2. You are stooping, hotching, your voice is diminished, and you feel that the other person will misunderstand anything you say. 3. You don't feel sexual energy and are usually dissatisfied after being intimate with someone. 4. You see sex as something bad that you shouldn't do. 5. You feel uncomfortable talking about sex. If at least 3 of these points apply to you, you might consider talking to a therapist to solve the problem and start enjoying the world of pleasure.